your screen?
I cannot see anymore the share screen mode.
It should be down, I think.
Oh yeah, now yes. Do you see my screen now? Okay, good.
Yes.
Maybe can you mute yourself, Robert?
All right. Manel, est-ce que tu as démarré l'enregistrement?
We are on live on the MIAI YouTube channel. It's okay.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, great. So then we can start. So welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. My name is Isabella Mena-Pineda. I am a researcher at INRIA. And it is my pleasure today to introduce the first MIAI deeptails seminar. So a deeptails seminar is a specific format in which two researchers are going to discuss a certain topic, of course, related to deep learning, as the noun already introduces. And the point here is to have a cross view of a topic between a PhD student and a recently graduated PhD or a very young researcher, so that they give us their respective views on the topic. So for the first edition of this format, we welcome today Kazuki Irie and Robert Csordas. So Kazuki is a postdoc in the Swiss AI Lab IDSIA at the University of Lugano, working with Professor Jürgen Schmidhuber. And he's mainly interested in machine learning and neural networks in a broad sense. Kazuki got his PhD in computer science in Aachen University a year and a half ago, roughly. And he's working a lot with Robert, which is a PhD candidate in the very same lab. And Robert is interested in the systematic generalization of learning algorithms and methods. And of course, all this mainly in the context of algorithmic reasoning. And today they are going to present a recent preprint or paper, doesn't really matter, on this topic, which has the title "The Devil is in the Detail: Simple Tricks to Improve the Systematic Generalization of Transformers." So I am very happy to introduce you two, and that you are the first edition of this kind of seminars. And I leave you the floor, and we try to keep the questions for the end of the seminar, unless there is something very particular, so you may also want to interrupt the speakers. So thank you very much, and welcome to the seminar.
Okay, so thank you very much for the introduction. I guess there's somebody who maybe has to mute himself or herself. We can hear many noise. If somebody can figure it out. Well, am I the only one who is hearing this noise? Not anymore, actually. Okay, so then I will start. So thank you again for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation. We are very happy to be here and giving a talk. And I'd like to start by saying that the main speaker today will be Robert, who will be talking about the paper that we mentioned, which actually will be presented at the conference EMNLP in 2 weeks. And yes, so that will be about systematic generalization and transformers. At the same time, the organizers asked us to give a talk as a duo by one postdoc, me, and a PhD student. So essentially, I'm starting with a sort of introduction to his talk. So that's why I titled my talk this way. And essentially, I'd be taking this opportunity to also talk about some results from another paper we wrote more recently, which has some underlying philosophy, which is essentially the same as the paper that Robert will be talking. And so that should be around like details which matters for when preparing some baselines. So therefore, the second title, when the baselines need all your attention. Oh, I cannot change. Okay, so as I have just said, this will be a sort of introduction to his talk. And here I will try to add some more perspective, like more materials on the perspective of the David and detail. And I hope that like the result that I will be presenting will give us some more broader perspective on this topic. At the same time, I would also like to say that there's nothing new that I'll be telling. So that's a sort of reminder. For example, I'm starting here by saying that the data sets are important, so are the good baselines. And here I'm saying that both of them are crucial ingredients when we are developing and measuring progress in our field. And in some cases, it can also happen that we have some idea, like new idea to be tested. So we pick up some new data set and then start playing with some baselines. But then suddenly interesting things can even be an independent study, and in some cases even become a full paper. So that's some context that we are talking in. So just to give some more context on that, so I'm citing a few papers here, which I would categorize as the type of works which revisited some baselines. So the one that I'm presenting here, by the way, can everybody see the screen? Maybe I should. I'm not sure if I'm hiding my screen, part of the screen with my screen sharing, but okay, let's say. Okay, it's good. Okay, so yeah, here's one paper that I'm showing. This one was presented at ICLEA 2018. So this one is a bit, maybe a little bit outdated, but there they essentially revisited the basic LSTM in the context of language modeling. And at that time, there are many more sophisticated models which are getting better performance than the LSTM. But here they have essentially shown that by revisiting some basic settings, they could outperform these more sophisticated models using the basic LSTM. And here are two more papers. The first one is even more recent one, so it should be presented at NeurIPS later this year by Bello et al. The revisiting ResNet's improved training and scaling strategies. There they essentially revisited the old ResNet architecture for image classification. And by using more recent training, scaling, and regularization techniques, they have shown that they can perform well and achieve some state of the art, but still using this old ResNet. And finally, at the bottom, I'm also showing another example, this time on in the case of reinforcement learning, using some simple recurrent policy network. So just to give some context, there are many papers like this, which essentially by revisiting the baseline settings, they obtain good results. So what we have done in another paper is even more basic, I'd say. So this work is titled Improving Baselines in the Wild, and this will be presented at a workshop on distribution shift at NeurIPS later this year. And this paper is essentially about a data set, which is called WISE dataset. This is a data set which was proposed earlier this year, that was presented at ICML earlier this year. It's a set of 10 data sets, which are designed to test the domain shift and the domain, like out of domain generalization of the models. So essentially the test set has two components. One is in domain, so the same domain as the training set, and then another set which is out of domain data set. They had also released the official baselines with the corresponding code and baseline settings. And here we focus on two of these data sets, which are called iWildCam and FMO. And both of them are simply image classification tasks. And here, essentially, I'll be highlighting some findings, which I think illustrate well the impact of some very basic baseline settings. Maybe before moving on to that, I'll be briefly covering the data set itself. So as I said, two data sets. The first one is the iWildCam. This is a classification of images of animals. So it's one out of 182 species of animals to be classified. And these images comes from, they are taken from different camera traps in different locations, which define the domains in their case. And then they report typically both two evaluation metrics. One is the classification accuracy, and then the F1 score. So that's for the AI outcome. And another one is the so-called functional map of the world, or FMO. That's also an image classification task, but this time it's a satellite images of classification of one of 62 buildings or land type clashes. And they are taken in different regions on the Earth and also over different years. So that's defined domains for this data set. And then they report the total accuracy, total in the sense that it's averaged over all regions. And also in addition, they report the worst region accuracy. So the accuracy on the worst, the lowest on the corresponding region. And in both cases, the architectures are simply based on like ResNet or DenseNet, the standard one, and then they even use them as a initialization. So now I'm showing one illustration of the importance of baseline tuning on the iWildCam dataset. As I have just said, they typically report on two evaluation metrics, so accuracy and F1 that I'm highlighting on the top. And here I'm presenting three models. The first row is the official baseline, and then our method A and B. And as you can see, our method A slightly outperforms the baseline on the F1 scores. So that's something you can see on the right part of the table. And then the method B largely outperforms the baseline on the validation set, so 66.6, which is much better than any others, while performing worse on other parts. So I note that there are large variability in terms of performance here. But if you ask me if this we had done, is that for both A and B, we increased the frequency of model checkpointing. So in the baseline settings, they were only checking the validation set accuracy after each epoch. But we check checkpointing. And then for A and B, respectively, we use, for A, we used F1 validation score as a criterion for the best model selection. And in case of B, we used accuracy. So that's why you can see that the respective models are performing well on the respective criterion that we had used. So these are all the same models, but you can see that the performance is very much different. Here is another illustration. So, but this time on another data set, FMO. Here I'm showing worst region accuracies on validation and test sets. And this time, three models. The first row, again, is the official baseline. And then the second row is some previous work, which developed some algorithm, which are specifically designed for this domain shift problem. And then the last row is our, let's say, new approach. So as you can see, in this case, we clearly outperform previous works on the validation set, like 52.4, which is much better than any other methods, and then performs on par with the best previous method on the test set, 34.4 compared to 34.3, so which is comparable. But again, the same question, is this a new method? Then our answer is no. So same as in the last case, we also increase the frequency of the model checkpointing here. And then we simply reduced the batch size from 64 to 20. Otherwise, everything is the same as in the official baseline. And as you can see, we again get a very big difference in terms of performance. So this is already the end of my introduction. So what I wanted to illustrate here is that so we have seen some like baseline setting aspect that you might say it's a details in general case, but as we have seen here, that can matter a lot in some cases. And as you can see, we didn't even touch the model hyperparameters or architecture. In the last case, we only changed one training hyperparameter, which was batch size, but then we get big improvements. You might say these are obvious, but if you look at the improvements that we had obtained, they are not neglectable. And I'd say in some cases they are publishable, especially in the last example. So I think this is maybe the aspect is very, very basic, but it might be good to have such a reminder from time to time, and including to myself. So so that's all for my talk, and I'm passing to Robert.
I will present our work on, which is called like the devil is in the detail. Simple tricks improve systematic generalization of transformers. In this work, we are considering systematic generalization. So first, I would like to introduce what is systematic generalization. And it is basically the ability of neural networks to perform well in a setting which is different from the setting that they are trained in. But this difference is like doable. So it is like all the knowledge that is needed to perform this kind of tasks is present in the training set, just in a different way. So the one form of this is systematicity, where some basic contribuents are like recombined in a way that is novel. For example, in the bottom examples, the left side is like that. So the network knows basic arithmetic operations, but it have not seen the particular one, which is the question here in the test set. Another form is productivity, which is interested in like longer examples. The length can be defined either in input or output or both. But the thing is that it like normally neural networks work very bad if the length of the test examples are longer than the training examples. And all of this revolves around learning some kind of rules instead of simple pattern matching. And I consider this as probably one of the major obstacles towards general AI, to actually learn the rules and not just like this surface pattern matching heuristics. So how do we measure systematic generalization? This is usually done on synthetic data sets, and different splits of these data sets are generated, which reflect the interesting, like these differences of interest. So let's say that typically like the train set can be shorter than a test set, or it can have different combinations of known parts like shown before. There are many of these datasets that are now commonly used in the literature. Probably the most famous is the SCAN by Lake and Baroni. Like many of these are concerned either of like performing simple operations. Let's say in SCAN, the jump twice should be simplified to jump. So it can be like complex, long sequences, which should be translated to more elementary sequences of movements. And PCFG is also like this, just different types of operations like copying, reversing, and modifying sequences. And then there is like, for example, CFQ and COX mainly revolves around semantic parsing. And then like once you have the parse tree, then it's easy to produce the answer. And mathematics dataset is something more close to real world, where the network has to solve like high school mathematics assignments, basically. And then there are multiple methods that people try to use. There are like simply training neural networks to do the task, or using meta learning or neurosymbolic methods. Each of them has some advantages and disadvantages. For example, neural networks are usually general because they have nothing special in their structure that is tailored towards this problem, but they are usually performing very bad. This can be even chance level bad. Meta learning is very underexplored in this domain, but it gives some improvements typically. Let's say that if the pure neural network was like 10%, then this could be 30–40%-ish, but it is still far from like being perfect. And then finally, there are the neurosymbolic approaches, which are usually very good, even perfect, but they are often not reusable. So they are barely reusable for other datasets. There are also like pure neural networks which fall into a similar category, where like the structure of the network is so much tailored towards the dataset that it is not reusable to other datasets, but on the other hand, it generalizes. But we would like something which is more general than that in general, because then you have to engineer for each of the datasets some kind of model, which takes years and much effort. And so the question is like, why is this the case? Like intuitively, transformers seem to match well with these kinds of like stepwise processing and like combining sub-results into each other. So in this specific plot, like it's a different dataset. It is like a dataset which is called a compositional table lookup, which is just applying functions to an argument. Here on the right side, you see the argument, and like it has to apply functions A, B, and C, which are learned. And you can like this is depicting the layers of the transformer and the versus time steps and how it combines, how it like for one plausible solution, how it can combine the arguments in order to solve the problem. And like intuitively this should work, but it does not. And the question is, why is it why transformers are so bad in this while they should be better intuitively? The other question we are concerned about is that like whether the current results of these baselines reported in the literature actually reflect the true potential of these neural networks. Whether the basic model configurations are right, whether hyperparameter tuning is done right, and so on. And other than that, also there are many variants of these networks which might not be tested on these datasets, but might be relevant. So in this work, we revisited basic model and training configurations and checked whether that can improve systematic generalization, and it turned out that it can by a large margin in some cases. So there are two underexplored transformer variants that are very relevant to this case. One is parameter sharing across the layers, which is like similar to universal transformers, except we don't use layer embeddings and don't use position embeddings added in each layer, but the main idea is the same. And the other is relative positional encodings. And the reason why these are relevant is like shown by this one of these hypotheses is that in order to be able to solve such problems in a way that is generalizable, one should decompose the problem into more elementary parts that can be later recomposed. If like there is no such decomposition, then it is very hard to imagine how one could generalize. And this is a problem specifically because if we compose operations sequentially, then the result of an operation is available only into the next layers in transformers. So operations can be performed per layer only if in parallel, only if they don't have data dependencies. And that means that like one operation is performed, the result is available to next layer and so on. And if the operations can be reused, let's say you want to add 3 numbers, then the adder should be reused after the first of these, the second, and the third. So that means that in each layer, the operation should be available to the network, which calls for shared layers. And this is universal transformers, basically. The second hypothesis is that many of these computations are usually local. So even in the natural text or like even in math text, symbols which are near to a symbol of interest is usually mattering more than the rest. And a form of this is captured by relative positional encodings. And it is very rare that in like, these kinds of tasks, one should focus on a fixed position. It is much more common that like it is a fixed offset from some position. And we will demonstrate the advantage of these. But first of all, let me talk about a problem. Specifically, it is called an end of sequence decision problem. And it is introduced by Newman et al. And this is concerned about the scan length split. And it is about training the networks without and with end of sequence token prediction. So normally, if you use a sequence to sequence model to predict the resulting sequence, then you have to predict when to stop in that sequence. And what they found is that if the neural network is trained to predict that token, then it tends to not generalize, while if it is not trained to do so, then it is generalizing. So in case it is not trained to produce this token, then it is evaluated in a so-called oracle length setting, when the number of the grand truth number of output symbols are considered. But it is not the reason why this is better, because even if the oracle length evaluation is used and the network has to predict the end of sequence token, and in this case it is ignored by the evaluation, then the network is still much worse than without doing this. And we tried, our hypothesis is that this is because of overfitting to the absolute positions. So we tried relative position embeddings in this case. And this table shows our results. The upper part of this table shows the results from Newman et al. And the lower part is our results. The columns are different length cutoffs. The length cutoffs in this case means that sequences up to a length, up to this number, is included in the train set, and the longer sequences are the test set. And this it is tested for multiple of these, and you can see that the original by Newman et al. Journal is very bad up until a length cutoff of 33, while universal transformers with relative position encodings are already perfect at length cutoff of 26, while not using oracle evaluation and predicting the end of sequence token. So there is also a catch here, that we found that we need one more layer than them to solve this problem. But if you check our baseline, which is the transformer truffle line in our model, that's already with one extra layer, and it can be seen that it is very bad still. And the relative position and universal transformers help a lot in this case. Length cutoff 26 here is special because it is the smallest sequence length when all the combinations of all basic ingredients are seen by the network. So at this point, the dataset is not ambiguous anymore. Before this point, it is. So it can be seen that from this point, the network performs well in general. So we can say that actually using relative position encoding solved the end of sequence decision problem. Next, we revisited some basic training settings. One of these is how to validate these models, and the other is scaling of embeddings. Specifically for validation, we can observe that the IID validation scores doesn't mean much. So here we show a table where we show different models in different datasets, and you can see that for basically all of them, except one, the performance is 100% on the IID validation set, while the OOD test set is much lower in some cases. Let's say for scan, it varies from 30% to 100%, while the IID validation set is always 100%. That means that there is no signal in the IID validation set to develop models and do model selection, which can be problematic. This is especially problematic if one uses it for early stopping, which was the case in the COGS dataset. We found that by just disabling early stopping in COGS and running the model up until the number of maximal iterations that they had in their code base, improves the performance from 35 to 65%, which is a huge jump. And this inspired us to conduct further analysis, and that is shown in this plot below. And on x-axis, the training iterations are shown, and the y-axis is the generalization accuracy. And it can be seen that the generalization accuracy is growing pretty much monotonically during the whole training. And the vertical bars show the points where early stopping would stop the training of these models if it is done based on the IID validation set. And this is especially problematic for the token embedding upscaling initialization, which we will talk later, but that's the usual model people use. And it can be seen that it would be stopped below 25% accuracy, where at the end it reaches 60-something%. even more interestingly, we found that the loss might be not a good indicator of the accuracy. So we ultimately care about accuracy at the end, but then even though this is the case, early stopping is sometimes done on the loss. And we found that, for example, in CFQ dataset, the out of distribution validation loss and out of distribution test accuracy are correlated positively. So both of them grow during the training. So in this case, just to explain why they are like out of distribution validation and test sets, the train set has a different distribution from the validation and the test, and those two are the same distribution in the case of a CFQ dataset. So here you can see that both of them grow during the training. And even more interestingly, we found that also the test accuracy and the test loss can show the same behavior, like both grow during the training. By the way, the color denotes the training iteration. And like on the left side here in this plot, you can see that the normal behavior we would expect, like once the accuracy grows, the loss shrinks. But on the generalization set, it is not the case. And we are interested in why this is the case. And to do this, to analyze this further, we did the following. We measured the test performance periodically during the training. And during each of these measuring rounds, if we check whether the given training test sample is classified as correctly or incorrectly. If it is classified correctly at any point in time, then we say that that is a good example, while if it is never classified correctly, then we say that this is a bad example. So because we have the history over training of this, we can decompose the test loss into good and bad components, which are additively giving the total loss. And you can see here on the plot A that the total loss will grow over time, but the loss of the good examples will shrink as expected, and the loss of the bad examples will grow. But the bad examples grow faster than the good examples shrink, so the total result is growing loss. You can see on the right side some histograms for this on the beginning and the end of the training. And you can see that the loss for the good examples shrinks to basically zero very quickly, while the for the bad examples, it can grow to very big numbers, and that outgrows the shrinking of the good examples. So even in datasets where this is not the case, it can be a problem that the loss exhibits epoch-wise double descent phenomenon, which means that the test loss in this case first shrinks, first goes down, then goes up, and then goes down even more. But there is a bump in the middle. So if one would do early stopping on this or model selection on this, that could be problematic. And in the same time, it can be seen also that in contrast, the accuracy grows constantly. And how can we fix these issues? So I think that more like the splits of the data should be considered more carefully. And for datasets where different difficulty levels can be generated, one could create a train set which is like easy, let's say short sequences, and then the validation set which is like medium difficulty, like some medium length sequences, and the test which is hard. And this way, one could use the validation set and have an actual meaningful signal on the model's performance, and still then test the model on a even more harder problem. And I think that this is a very low price to pay for generalization if this could help in it. In some other cases, this is not so obvious how to do it. So one could propose, for example, like multiple data sets of similar type, and then use some of them for training, some of them for testing, and others for validation. But this is a hard problem, and by no means this is the fix for it. The last thing that we considered is the scaling of embeddings. And actually, we discovered this accidentally by me implementing the positional embedding and the word embedding combination in like a non-standard way, and realizing that it is better in some cases, in some datasets, but while it is worse in the others. So then we decided to investigate what is actually happening here. And we came up with 3 variants. First, the token embedding upscaling is what is done in the original transformer paper, where the word embeddings are initialized by Xavier initialization and scaled up by the square root of the model size. And the positional embeddings are added. The positional embeddings are always amplitude 1 sinusoids. So the no scaling variant is when the word embeddings are initialized by a normal distribution of mean zero and variance of 1. And then there's a positional embedding downscaling variant, which is initializing the word embeddings by timing initialization and scaling down the positional embeddings to match the amplitude. So it must, like, the norm of the 2 vectors must match, otherwise it can inhibit the training. And interestingly, we found that this positional embedding downscaling variant outperforms the others in most of the cases. And also, this table also shows that the ID validation set is not giving a very good signal on what embedding to select. And it's also interesting that the other 2, the token embedding downscaling and the no scaling, performs well. Like one performs well on one, and the other performs well on the other dataset. And on both of them, position embedding downscaling performs the best, which is good. So putting this all together resulted in like improvements in 5 different datasets. And next, I will highlight some of the main reasons between like some of the main results here. In SCAN, the 3-layer universal transformer with relative positional encoding improved from 9% to 100% at the length cutoff of 26. In the case of CFQ, by using universal transformers, the performance went up from 64 to 77% on the length split, and the relative positional encoding added another 4% to the accuracy. On PCRG, training much longer than in the original paper resulted in like significant performance bump of like 15 or roughly 15%. And using universal transformers with relative positional encoding added another 20 or 10% depending on the split. On COGS, disabling early stopping was very helpful, increasing from 35 to 65%. And embedding scaling, disabling label smoothing, fixed learning rate increased the performance to 80%. And then there was a marginal performance improvement by relative positional encodings. On mathematics data sets, we also improved compared to the reported numbers, but this is a bit tricky to compare because we use a different setting where like we train the network module by module, while the original paper has it trained together on the whole data set, which we don't do because it is very costly in terms of computing power. And actually, if we see the table and compare to our transformer, which is the first column, then the improvement is much better and much bigger than in case of the reported, comparing to the reported numbers. And this is because just by training on one module, there is no transfer between modules, so our baselines are worse than the reported ones. So to conclude, some recommendations to try if you're interested in systematic generalization is, first of all, use shared layers with relative positional encodings. Second, be careful with the validation set, and if it's possible, use an OOD validation set and use loss accuracy instead of loss for validation. This is especially true for early stopping. Never use IID validation set for early stopping. And finally, embedding scaling can have a huge effect on the performance. So thank you for your attention. All the code is available online, and I'm waiting for your questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Kazuki and Robert, for the talk. So now we have time for questions. If someone wants to ask questions, so you just unmute your microphone and go ahead, or write in the chat if you prefer.
For me, it's the same. So
Yeah. So I may start with one question. So the first question that I have is regarding this shared layers. So you shown that this works for the for the few data sets. I was wondering if for what is your intuition for kind of applications like in computer vision, for instance. Do you think that it is also a good idea to share the parameters across layers of the transformer? Have you any experiments or insights on that?
I never use transformers for vision. So I don't know if the task is something which is compositional. Let's say that there are these like different, how do they call it? Like, for example, the ARC data set and things where reasoning is needed to solve the task, and the task is visual. Then there, I think they might help. For ordinary applications, like, I don't know, image classification, I don't think so, because the structure of the problem is very different, and it's not like not compositionally putting together known constituents, but like having this like different levels of feature detectors in the network. So that might be suboptimal for that case.
Yes.
But for text-based and like mainly for reasoning tasks. So my goal with all of this would be to have a model which is flexible enough to be used in a text-to-text, whatever translation datasets or like reasoning datasets or all of these. But the model would be in the same time biased towards generalization, like to learn rules instead of like surface statistics, and to like that. Ideally, that would result in more consistent answers from the side of the models, or like it would avoid the cases which is currently very frequent, that you ask some logical sentence which is very similar, like I have 5 apples, I ate one, how many apples I have, and the models completely fail on this. So
okay. Yes, okay, I understand, thanks. So I think we have a question from Gerard Bailly. So go on, Gerard.
Okay, so thank you for the talk. I just want to speak about end of sequence prediction. In fact, one problem arises from the fact that, in fact, you have a very strong imbalance between carry on, and just one frame which is stop. So, for example, we do speech generation. You can have large sequences of 1,000 frames and just one end of sequence, in fact, bits. So one way also to sort this out is the fact that you somehow give a chance to the gate prediction to stop later. So what is your opinion about this?
I didn't fully understand what do you mean by giving the chance of the gate. Like,
you just have only one frame which is asking for stopping, but you can have 10 or 15 or whatever. So you carry on predicting, but you have a much larger number of stop tokens at the end, not only one.
But how do you know then whether you have to stop actually or not? Or you run it to a fixed number of steps and take the last one?
Yeah,
or
yeah. So you give more chance, because for example, in speech you don't the ground truth of stopping is not so clear. When you have the end of a signal, you know it's very fuzzy. So just giving some kind of a very precise one one frame of stopping is perhaps too much for the system to, especially if you are dealing with variability of the signals. So the idea is really to have more flexibility of determining the right end of sequence in that case. It's not perhaps the issue for systems which are dealing with characters or with not natural signals or biological signals. But in terms of biological signal, the hand is always a bit fuzzy. So
yeah. So this is a very different setting. So these data sets are always generated in a consistent way. So there is an algorithm that generates them. So it is very well defined where the sequence should end. So I think that this else decision problem would look very different in case of some more naturalistic data.
okay.
Maybe I might comment on this here. So when you are doing training, you know where exactly the end is, right? Whereas when you are I guess Gerard, you are talking about like at test time during decoding, how to decide where to stop. But then I think the people simply do sort of like beam search. So instead of doing like greedy decoding, they essentially expand the hypothesis and then at the end decide like where the length would be variable depending on the hypothesis in the beam. And I'd say that's something which is already take into account in this kind of like search algorithms. So if that answers your question. Not really.
No, but there is still how to say imbalance between not to stop and stop. So you have a much larger examples of where not to stop than where to stop. You have just have one gate at the end. So it's in terms of statistical distribution of not stopping exemplar and stopping frames, you have an imbalance that have to be solved somewhere.
But actually, there could be many sources of such imbalances.
Yeah.
So not just the end of sequence. So the good solution would be to make the network be able to handle this like inside the network. And because let's say that you want to detect a very rare event, then that's the same thing, just in a very in a way that you could not define it so nicely. So it is very hard to upsample these events or something like that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are there other questions? I was curious about something when you were discussing about the validation and the training set. So at some point, if I understood correctly, you said that you wanted to have an kind of easy training set, then a bit more medium validation set, and a harder test set. But then, I mean, how do you, like, if you have to decide when to stop training, for instance, using early stopping, is this a good strategy? Because if the training set is easier than the validation set, then the validation loss it's going to start growing quite early. So I am a bit confused with that. I don't know if I understood that correctly, by the way.
So if you have a the splits, I think yes. So if you have a model that generalizes well, that means that it will work well on the harder set. Now the harder set is like from perspective of the training set, both the validation set and the test set are harder. But then the goal here would be to have one set which you can use for model development, which would be the medium hardness. So you would have some signal on whether the model generalizes or not. So if the medium data set performance, like accuracy is very bad, that would mean that the model is not generalizing well. While if the accuracy on the medium set would be high, that would mean like either of the two things. One is that like ideally the model generalizes well, but it can also mean that it overfitted in a way to the validation set. But it is since you are just tuning on the validation set, it is, at least that's my intuition, or like that it would be much harder to overfit in a way that it works for the validation set but not work in the test set in this setting. While if the training and the validation set are the same distribution, then it is very easy to do this. Then there is like any kind of model that can memorize, you can solve this perfectly, because just by memorizing memorize and interpolate minimally, then it can solve these kind of splits. But if they are very different and they require learning the rules already, like to work on on the medium difficulty based on the easy, that already requires some kind of rule learning instead of just purely interpolating between examples.
Okay, and a follow-up to this is So how do you do that? Because in your slide you said it was about the length of the sequence, but you know, it's not necessarily because it's longer that it's more difficult, and for other tasks maybe it's not that easy to just split and consider a bit harder data set for validation.
Yeah, that's what I also said in the slides, that like in certain cases it is easy, like for example in this, or if you have like testing systematicity, and then you can reserve a certain set of like combinations for training, another set of combinations for validation, and the third set for testing, for example. But in general, it is much harder, and then I don't have a good solution for this. So what seems reasonable is to come up with sets of data sets which are similar, and then use some of the sets to test, like use basically some of them for development, some of them for validation, and some of them for testing. Then you can get these not necessarily different difficulty levels, but different distributions.
Okay, good. I have a last question, but I will still ask if there are other questions. Otherwise, the only one you will get tired of me. Okay, well then I'll go ahead. So it's about so when you combine this relative positional encoding and at the same time you share the parameters, I have the feeling that this might be well adapted to take local decisions, but I don't know if this is well suited to take global decisions that would be an outcome on the whole input sequence. So I don't know if my intuition is just wrong, or you have any insights on this. Actually,
like all of these data sets are taking decisions on the whole data sets, and we have actually a follow-up paper. I don't know whether I call it follow-up, but it is again systematic generalization, and there we have specific AD sequence classification problems, and we can show that like a stronger variant of these ideas and like some other tricks can generalize very well in these cases. And I don't think that it's an issue of like length of the sequence. So if you have enough layers, and if you have like bias towards locality, you can still like build on top of each other's. It is like a COMNET. Like COMNET is also like focusing on just a very small neighborhood, but then the subsequent layers add up those to see a global context. And it depends on like, I think that is necessary for solving these kinds of tasks, because they are built up from some elementary building blocks, and that's the way that you can that you can use in order to generalize to different distribution. You should never do a global computation which takes in account the whole sequence. You should always focus as much as you can on some local neighborhoods, solve the local problem, and then build up those local problems in order to solve the global problem.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that answers my question. Thanks. Are there other questions? I guess. All right. So I think then we can stop here. I wanted to thank you again, Kazuki and Robert, for your talk. It was very interesting and very nice to have you here. And hopefully one day we can meet in person. Yes. But for this time it was complicated to come, I understand.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.